I guess the original question I asked is organizationally the types of incentives that need to be there for a team that is enlightened, that gets it, and they say we do want to own the problem, but we can't do it all. There's the enterprises are huge, and there's so many data sets and so many people, and so we tend to build teams that are agile, that are lean. 4 or 5 people, a cluster of 4 or 5 enlightened people. What do they have to do to be able to move freely and effectively within the enterprise and actually demonstrate to those that are skeptical that there is indeed value in doing this? Not just theoretically, but here's value. We solved this problem with the customer. We reduced churn because we did this.
Well, there's a million things that could be in the way of that happening. The company's culture, leadership doesn't know what it's want. There's all kinds of historical baggage that's come along, power structures, incentives. There's all kinds of that's a broad thing. I don't think there's a single answer to that. I do know that there are probably basic activities that you can do where you may not totally understand. You can't define the impact of those things. But for example, as Elon Musk would say, it's like, let's just get down to brass tacks here. Your product sucks. Spend more time with your customers. Well, what does that mean? It's go out and actually talk to the people that are buying or using this thing and understand them. And it sounds really simple, and it is, and it doesn't happen because people think that they can speak for someone else. The manager, the department head thinks they can speak for all the CSRs that are on the phone all day because they used to do that job 8 years ago, even though they haven't actually done it in 8 years. And they think that the way they do it is the way all the CSRs do it. And in reality, the job has changed. And so they think they can speak on behalf of this data product that you're building for the customer service representatives. And they actually aren't really aware of how that's going to fit into that workflow. And so they stand in the way of the makers, and I'm going to call them designers. Slight tangent here. Why do I call you a designer if you're doing this stuff? Because in the world of design, there's no null choice. Every choice is a choice, including doing nothing. So effectively, if you're building a data product or a dashboard, you are a designer. Someone decided that chart went there. Someone decided there's a button and it goes to this other thing. You might not be super informed about it, but you are a designer. So my thing is about making people better at it. How do I help improve people and be aware of this, that there's the rendering of intent, that it's not just about, I don't know, that's what came out of the plot at the end, and I don't know, I just saw a chart like that before, so I used it, to I intentionally chose this and I thought about it because of this end case user thing, whatever, I understood the problem space. So that's my little tangent on everybody's a designer. So when I talk about makers, there's too many people, architects, data engineers, software engineers, analysts, whatever, there's too many of them. You are a designer in a way if you're making something that a human is going to use. So routing ourselves back on the road here to your original question, lots of reasons I think can get in the way, but how many hours did the technical people spend shadowing one of these customer service representatives? Do you know what it's like to take calls? And you'll hear this all the time. This is actually not, in the software world, this is not really new anymore. A lot of teams that have this kind of thing, they require their engineers to spend a certain amount of time shadowing with the headset on, listening to customer complaints come in to understand what it's like, because those stories can be very powerful at changing behavior. And it's easy to look at a chart and say, well, 82% of people reported a problem with whatever, and 12 people had a bug report. But it's different than listening to 3 really interesting phone calls. And those things are what can really have impact, not just on the makers and kind of tying your Spark pipeline or whatever thing that you made back to this way downstream person, but it really brings some new insight, not to mention possibly some new ideas or perspectives that
absolutely
that have not been heard before because this gap has been there. So simply spending more time, and if you want to keep track as a manager, it's how many hours a week did my team spend with stakeholders? Eat your vegetables. I can't tell you what the immediate value of that is. I just know long-term, that is what is going to build empathy and make you build better stuff. So eat your vegetables. And that means spending time with customers. And you can start by just sitting on the phone and listening. And over time, you can develop the skill of doing contextual inquiry and learning how to actually run a research session to ask good questions to get you to something that actually starts to inform your more day-to-day work.
Because you're in the learning business. Yeah, essentially, right? You're in the learning business. You got to learn. You got to be curious and probe the audience and the customer in this case, whether it's internal or external, right? Customer is someone that has a problem. And you have an assumption of what that problem is, might not be true. So you got to ask those questions. So curiosity, I think it's is a huge element to that. But I have experiences and I know a bunch of friends that work in large enterprises in various data roles from science to engineering. And that tends to be this isolation, this siloing where you are given, a ticket, as you mentioned in the beginning, and that's your job and your performance is measured against that, right? So
you said performance is measured against that. So if the organization has a robust skill set in these things that I'm talking about, and this group can properly deliver and translate that information to the data teams that matter, you may not need them to spend as much time. But I can almost guarantee you, your company is probably going to develop better products and services the more especially when we're talking about digital here, the more that all the technical people have some type of personal connection to real human beings. It's no longer this abstract idea of a customer. It's John in marketing. It's Jane and HR. It's a real person, and we saw what they did. We saw what their December period, the crunch looks like, or county tax season. We know what that's like. We saw it. We know how important it is that systems are running at 100% accuracy right now, because any flaw right there could completely screw up. That guy's worried sick about this. And it's very different when you just hear we need 100% uptime versus this person's job is on the line and they are literally sweating bullets about the reliability of this information. And we've learned through research that this person is scared to death because they're the ones that write the final number in the thing that goes to the CEO. And if that number is not well informed and that gets out to the public and then stocks are traded and all this kind of stuff. And so a UX research, we would be thinking about looking for this kind of stuff. My business coach calls it emotionally charged language. And designers are looking for this with software and when we're doing digital stuff to see where people are worried, where they're joyful, where anytime the emotions are being triggered there, to see, is there a way we can remove that friction here? We need a preview screen, or we need a test run where it's you take this number and we rerun a Monte Carlo simulation and double check the thing. And then it goes out the door. And some of that's doesn't feel like it's a requirement and nobody asked us for it. But that was the thing that made this actually make these people say, Loris, your team kicked ass. Can you also help us with this other thing? This is great. It got them to be thinking of you as an ally and a strategic partner instead of you gave me exactly what I wanted. Thank you. It's not quite what I needed though. I'm so sorry, but I thought it was going to have customer data, and I know I never said it needed to have customer data, and I'm really sorry. And you get that kind of relation. I'm sure you've been there, and you're just but that's your problem because you didn't ask for it.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me more about the want and the need. How do we probe for the need? I mean, because the want is important to sell it, right? Otherwise, there's people who go that's not what I want. Yeah. But what you need might be different from what you want. So how do you advise people to do that?
Well, we use a technique called laddering, which is basically, or why questioning, which you've probably heard before, but this is a very good reason. And this has to be used carefully. And I will admit, as a consultant, it's much easier for me to ask those questions because I don't have all the politics and stuff that may come in when you're asking a leader why, and they're saying, we're moving to Snowflake. And this decision may have been discussed a lot, and maybe that decision is now downstream, and you're asking why, and you realize they don't really know why except everyone else was doing it or whatever. And so this can be a sensitive, and I just want to acknowledge that this can be a sensitive thing to ask why. However, if it's done with a true sense of empathy, and the way I would couch that with someone is to say, look, maybe our team, we haven't hit home runs all the time here. we don't want to spend time building the wrong thing for you. And there's a good chance we can do that. So I'm not asking you why to challenge you. I'm asking to make sure that I surface all the assumptions, all the unspoken needs, the kinds of stuff that usually isn't written in a JIRA ticket or a requirements document. This is called discovery. And it's we work through it together. And it's not that you're withholding it. It's that it needs to be surfaced in a language I can understand and then take back to my team. And that's how we build better stuff for you. And my team has better success. And we become partners here instead of like, I gave you what you asked for, but it still didn't taste very good. And you don't want to come eat at my restaurant anymore. You said you want to double the flour in the cake. It's like, yeah, it's pretty freaking dry, isn't it? But that's what you said. I want teams to be challenging that and saying, well, why? Like, how will it help you to have double the flour in the cake? Like, that implies that there's not enough flour, but how do you experience not enough flour? Is it mean it's dry?
Ache?
Is it wet? What's behind that?
Well,
I don't know. Like, and you find out this other thing, and it's just like, oh, okay. So you saw some report, a trendy TV show about flourless cakes, and everyone else is doing it. Well, why are you doing that? Well, we need to do something different. I don't feel like we're very innovative. Okay, so you want to do something different. Why? It's like, well, because I'm up for a review, and like, I need to show some value in our work. Okay, so really, you're concerned about like your review coming up, and you don't feel like we've been particularly innovative. Yes, that's it. Okay. Well, we're working on some small machine learning experiments. They're small, but we could start to show, like, we know that the business strategy is supposed to include AI. What if we could show some little wins here with some of this work, this prototyping we've been doing here? Would that, instead of doubling the flour in the chocolate cake, how would that sound? That would be awesome. I'd love to be able to say that we did something with machine learning. So I'm totally improvising and riffing here. This is my jazz musician in me. But the point there was I simulated that conversation there. And we ended up finding out that the real reason the stakeholder wanted something was because of their review was coming up, and they felt like we weren't being innovative, we weren't having an impact, we weren't showing anything, and we connected the dots to a business strategy, which was we need to start using our data assets and leveraging AI, very vague and high level. And now you're like, okay, I know this person needs to feel fulfilled. There is a genuine customer need here. There's this machine learning prototype, this thing we've been working on. I can connect these dots now. And now everyone can win. The business wins. This person feels like they're up for a raise or whatever. Our team built something that matter for a real customer. There would be a real customer need. I'm not saying just like, go build a model so this guy can get a raise or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're digging for the unarticulated needs through asking really good questions in a very empathetic way. I will tell you there's some stuff about why, at least in from sales, from the sales world, and I learned this in Chris Vosta's masterclass. He was I don't know if you know him, but he's a consultant in sales, but a former FBI hostage negotiator.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he talks about to be careful with the question why, because it actually can trigger a little bit of a challenging kind of vibe. You imagine like the little kid that you're like, we're not going to Disney. Why? They keep asking you why, and it can come across that way. So I often recommend the people in my seminar to mix up that vocabulary a little bit. If you ask why, then you might say, well, could you tell me more about the reason for doing this? Which is the same way as saying why, but just changing the lingo curious. A little bit and being curious there and not just literally keeping asking why over and over again.
People will fire you at some point. This guy asks why all the time.
Yeah, it's just so. Like, because I said so, right? And that's often a conversation stopper there, and that's the sign of a risk-averse organization that wants to keep repeating yesterday. And it's like,
but then you got to change up, right? Because if you want to keep repeating yesterday, maybe.
Some people are happy with that. I guess it's like, well, do you want, like, I want to do work that matters, and I want to impact people's lives, and that's just my personal thing. And some people are probably okay with like, look, I see this whole software, this architecture thing is going to go off the cliff, but it's my job and it's not my problem. And it's like, if that's your thing, fine. That's not the audience that I'm trying to help. I'm trying to help people who actually want this work to matter, and they want to have a real impact, to use this skill set called design to help you do that. And you don't have to be a designer to do it. You can leverage some of these techniques. Some designers will argue with me, and they do not like this idea that If you're not trained, that you can't do it. There's definitely a protectionist thing. I'm not in that camp. I'm in the camp that democratizing this activity, it's the difference. It's not a professional. You may not be a professional at it. A designer is an accelerant for your organization. If you don't want to go through the learning process, you want to cut the corners, you want to go faster, well, designers can help you do that. And they can also then, alleviate a data engineer from having to spend as much time doing this non-engineering type of work that is important for somebody to do. That's why you hire people or get help with it,
That's right.
is to accelerate.